Hello, this is an assessment of a Bluthner style 7 grand piano. It's 190 centimetres long. It's the Jubilee model. That's often called that, and you can see quite an ornate frame here. That's what identifies it as a Jubilee model. I'm not quite sure why it's called the Jubilee model. If you're in the trade and can help out there, that would be very useful. We did actually work on another one and had to repolish the piano because it was standing in a very light place, and this side of the piano was polyester, and this side had cracked on the polyester. Now this is French polish, so it doesn't crack, but it does feel slightly rough, and I think the heat is what does it. So possibly if the heat was getting on from this window, then that would damage it. But as you can see at the moment, it's got curtains on it, so it shouldn't be damaging it, but it's obviously something to watch out for. This is dried out compared to the other sides, which is original French polish, really beautifully done. It's done by Ladbrokes apparently in Birmingham in 1998. I did go round Ladbrokes before they closed down. I can't remember when that was. It's a long time ago now, and this 1998 was when this one was restored and purchased from Ladbrokes, and I think it's an excellent job generally that's been done, though it's been used a lot since then, so there's work that needs to be done. The key tops are in extremely good condition. They're ivory key tops. Apparently one or two have come off and been stuck back on, quite well stuck back on. There's not too much of a ridge here. That's something we are always having to do, obviously, and they need buffing if they're going slightly dull, so they'll attract the dirt if they're not buffed. So that's another job, to check them by tapping them. We tap them all and check them and make sure they're not going to come off. There's a slight crack there, a slight chip I should say, and we can try and disguise that as well as possible. So cosmetically it's not bad at all, in good condition, but it's mainly the clients asking to be looked at to see if there's any work that can improve the piano. Now the piano has been restrung. It's got larger tuning pins than the originals. That's one way you can tell, and also they're not finished off in the way that original Bluthner strings are finished off. As you mentioned before, there's a ridge here which there isn't on originals. The coning goes right through and you don't see this ridge here. They're not original Bluthner strings. I'm not convinced those done in 1998. Perhaps they were done a little bit earlier, but they're very well redone, and you can hear the tone of them. They're very lush sounding strings, so that's encouraging. The hammers are quite used, and that's making them sound not quite as clear as they might be, though it doesn't affect the bass too much if the hammers are worn. It's more this area here, and they're definitely very worn, as we'll see in a minute, and that's not a clear enough sound. There's a pleasant sound always on a Bluthner, even when they're worn, but the sound should be clearer because less hammer needs to be hitting the string, and also it's slightly on the dull side. They're probably a bit soft. The soundboard, apparently the client was wondering if there was a buzz caused by the soundboard, and we'll have to investigate that. Unless we restring the whole piano and then reshim the soundboard, then obviously we're not going to do that unless we restring the piano. So looking underneath, let's have a look at the soundboard underneath. So looking underneath, you can see these ridges. They're not opened up cracks, you can't see any light through them, but it could well be that that's affecting it. We'll just check them and perhaps check the tightness of these buttons here, screws, and then buttons with the screws too. So we'll just check those and make sure that they're not causing any buzzes. But it's not that common for Bluthners to get buzzes from the soundboard. I did actually tune the whole piano, and this tuning pin was very, very slightly looser than the rest, but they were generally quite acceptable, I think. So I did set that pin, and I've marked it just I'm tending to do that these days, so that when it's next tuned you can just see if that one's stable. So the process of setting the pin, as I've shown before, is this is a rest pin setter, and it just put it on top of the pin. Hold it tight while you hit the top here gently. The idea is not to hit the pin necessarily too much further in, just to roughen up the wood. Over the years, with lots of tuning, the tuning pin does tend to form a groove in the wood, which you didn't initially have, and then obviously you may need to rough it up a bit just to get back to the original tightness. The client was wondering if the damping could be improved. Down here, the damper's fighting against the vibration of the string, and it's sometimes quite hard to cut that off completely, but we'll try and improve it if we can. On these wedge dampers it's better. Sometimes on Bluthners, if they've been cleaned, you find that the wedge damper's been pushed like that and it sits up like that. It's on Bluthners particularly, they swivel, and that can be a problem, so you've got to be sitting properly on the string again. And that one isn't quite, you can hear the harmonics, so once I've moved it, it's given me a problem. That's a bit better, I'll work on that to get it perfect. So that's better, same as the one next to it now. So you have to line it up exactly. So if you do find that they've been pushed down and they're sitting up, then you'll have to really try and get them exactly as flush as possible. The damping here, that last one often is problematic, though the frame's not interfering with it. And I think those practically as good as you can get them. Now looking at the action, I was just checking the felts here, and I noticed this, I don't know if you can see it on the video, but there's some some powder. I thought it was wire wool residue, but in fact it's graphite powder that apparently the tuner was putting on. Let's see if we can see better with lifting up the keys. You can't really see it very well, but it sparkles slightly on the video, doesn't seem to be showing up. And I wonder what that was, but apparently the tuner's been putting graphite powder. I've never seen anyone use that before, but I think I've heard of it being used. So maybe that's what it is. Now look at the action, it's the original Patient Bluthner action with this L-shaped spring, which sometimes is replaced. On this age of piano you'd expect to see this. Occasionally it's replaced. In fact we occasionally replace them for clients as well, but it performs very well with that action, and some people actually prefer it. We mentioned this before. The hammers are extremely worn, as you often find with Bluthners. They get played a lot, and you see that there's more than 1 centimetre hitting the string there, and that's not making a clear sound. These are good quality hammers. This is a bit higher up the keyboard. They're not particularly soft, and not dig my nail into it too far, but they're just too flat really, and if you tried refacing, try and getting back to the same shape, as you can see perhaps on some of the top ones here, the original shape where it's rounded, it's going to be too little hammer and it just won't bounce properly off the string. So I don't hesitate to say that needs replacing. And the back checks are quite worn. They would work perfectly for a long time to come, but they're quite easy to replace, so that's something else that could be done. And you can see that someone's numbered them all here, where they've taken them off and got the hammers replaced. So you can see there actually some lubricant, and in fact that one's still too tight. If we lift them up, you can see that one is still too tight, so really the hinge needs replacing here. Sorry, I didn't mean the hinge, the whole hinge, but the pin here needs replacing. It's going to have to be changed, and that would be, but it's been lubricated already. We could try lubricating it again. It'd probably work for a while, but I think if changing this will be much better. And we could check them all, see if they're tight at all. So here's the worksheet summary. It was restored by Ladbrokes, Birmingham in 1998. And the client's actually got the original receipt here, so we can see how much it cost. This was the piano supplied refurbished, reconditioned, not just refurbished. There's lots of work that they did to it. And Ladbrokes, a very respected firm, they're actually one of the last people to try to make Broadwood barless grand pianos. It's a very nice concert piano stool they supplied with it, or small concert stool. I think this is by John Austin, the firm that's been taken over by somebody else now. Still a British firm that still makes good piano stools. So that's very positive, and they've restrung the piano beautifully. So obviously they're respected restorers. The hammers are just very worn, having been played a lot, and replacing the hammers and regulating obviously needs totally re-regulating. The key dip's a bit great. The client doesn't want it set too low, so 11 millimeters perhaps a minimum. Our team normally sets it about 10 or 10.5 for Bluthners, and Bluthners might set them even less. There's a dispute as to how deep they should be. If you're in the trade and like to comment, please do. So improving the bass stamping is something we try to do, but the touch will all be different anyway when that's been done, because with new hammers we just redo the touch and set it, if you want it slightly heavy, maybe 52 grams here and 54 in the bass and 50 in the top treble. But normally otherwise we set it at 50 in the middle. There's some small things I noticed when I was tuning, that the damper stop rail's a bit too high, and you get a bit of kickback on the keys. Not one of the major things. And checking for loose key tops. The key dip was as I say, a major thing that I felt I would feel uncomfortable playing it like that. So I hope that's helpful. We're just lubricating the balance rail. It was lubricated previously, but I think just lubricating a bit more will be useful. And there were graphite filings, according to the client. The tuner was using graphite, and not filings, graphite powder. So that I mistakenly thought that was wire wool filings, but it was apparently graphite powder. And I don't know if you're in the trade and use that. It'd be useful to know. So that's an assessment of a Bluthner Style 7 made in 1904. They're all beautiful pianos, and they seem to maintain their tone right throughout Bluthners. Wherever you... There's no patchiness, but the hammers are causing patchiness because they're too flat around this area, particularly. That affects it the most. Down here affects it less, but they're too soft as well, slightly too soft, but mainly too flat. So too much hammer area is hitting the string, and the harmonics are being deadened. Instead of being brought out as a live harmonic, it's like touching a violin string with your finger. If you had too thick a finger, it wouldn't sound properly with a harmonic. So it's that kind of thing that's happening. You need hammers that are rounded and not too much hitting the string to get the right sound out of it. So that's an assessment of a Bluthner 1904, 190 centimetres long, style 7. That means it's not Alicot, it doesn't have the Alicot system, but really there's not a lot of difference between the two. They're both high quality pianos, and Bluthner's so consistent that the tone is very consistent throughout. The hammers are causing it to not bring out the harmonics properly, so the tone is duller than it should be. It's a bit like touching a violin string with your finger. If your finger's too fat, you won't bring the harmonic out properly. So it needs to be, it's about 1 centimetre hitting the string at the moment, so it needs to be as little as possible really, a rounded hammer, and then it'll bring the harmonic out beautifully. And at the moment it's cutting the harmonic out completely, it's deadening it. Still a good tone because Bluthners are. The action's a bit on the heavy side. When we redo the hammers, and I think that's the main work to do, then obviously we re-weight the keyboard too, to your liking. So if you want a slightly heavier touch, then maybe 52 grams here, 50 grams here, and 54 here. But normally we would set it at 50 grams or slightly less than 50 if anything. It depends on what you need really. If you don't play very much and you're maybe older and find it harder to get enough power on the piano, then slightly lighter. The other thing is to try and improve the damping here, but I don't think we can do too much to that. And there's the vibration to the string means that it can't cut off immediately, but we'll do as well as we can. And various other jobs that I mentioned, but so the hammer's the main thing, and other things I showed on the worksheet. So even around here it's a bit not quite precise as it should be with the new felt, and it's slightly too soft as well, but it's mainly the fact that too much hammer's hitting the string. So thank you very much for listening. If you want a piano restored, please do write to us, info@robertspianos.com. We can assess the piano for you, and then you can decide what kind of work you would like done. This could be restrung with a new rest bank. It's got original rest bank here, but I don't really think it's that necessary. And the client's saying the soundboard may be causing some buzzing, so that's something we could look at. Obviously we've restrung the piano and replaced the rest blank, which we'd normally do on a Bluthner. Then you get new strings and new rest blank, and it's like a new piano. And then we'd also shim the soundboard, and you'd have a perfect soundboard. So that is an option, but obviously much more expensive option. And the strings are good. It's been restrung well. Thank you very much for listening.